No, it's not my event, Fabian.
No.
This meeting is being recorded. By joining, you are giving consent for this meeting to be recorded. Privacy policy. Join the call.
Hi, Joanne.
01@gmail.com entering lobby.
Joanne, this is the
Yes,
workshop.
01@gmail.com. Join the call.
You're welcome. You're in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Erica, I wonder, would you like me to turn off? Would you like me to turn off the announcements on your settings so that when people come and go, it won't announce them?
Yes.
Yes,
That'd be
please.
helpful for you because it's a little distracting.
Yeah, it
Yes,
is.
that would be
Okay.
helpful.
I think I can do that. I think I can do it. Let me try. Well, I'm afraid I can't because I'm not a presenter. I'm not an organizer, so I can't do it.
Erica can do it. It is distracting because it drives me nuts.
It's real easy to do. You just go into the three little dots
And
and
guest
go
right
into
and
the
entering
meeting
lobby.
settings, and you just turn off the announcement.
Karen back.
I can't hear you because
guest
Siri's
right
blabbing
join the
every
call.
second.
Can you repeat that for us, Wanda?
Yeah, what I was saying is for one of the organizers, you can go into the three dots.
Yeah, Erica, can you get rid of all that
Eric
entering
Garcia
and leaving?
left.
It's very
Guest right.
distracting.
Join the call.
Very
Elaine Levy
distracting.
left. Guest right.
Hey, Yolanda, is that your?
You can go into your meeting settings, the three dots,
Do that.
and you can go and turn off the announcement. It's real easy. It's just a little dot. If not you, then one of your colleagues. That's an
I
organizer.
have no colleagues. I live alone.
Oh,
She's not talking to you.
I was asking Erica, who's the organizer. Are you the organizer, Erica?
Yes.
Join the call.
Let me see.
It's three little dots at the top, and go into meeting settings
Okay.
or options, meeting options perhaps. And then you'll see announce when people come and go, and it's highlighted now. So if you turn it off, then it'll go off. If you just push it in the other direction, the little button.
Let's see. I'm working on that now.
So it's just the three dots, and then it's called meeting options, and it's a list of things, and it's toward the top.
Levy left. Guest right. Entering lobby.
You have to save it. After you change it, you just save it, and then it'll change.
Elaine Levy left. Guest right. Join the call. Emily L. Frank joined the call. 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 Frank joined the call.
Oh, so
Hearing a lot of feedback and echo. Can we please minimize the echo?
I can see it on the mics. I'm not sure where it's coming from. I don't see
All right.
Siren joined the call.
See, I'm not able to access that.
Okay. All right.
Because
Perhaps, well, you have 29 people are here now, so that may be all of your guests. The majority of them may be in already.
Well, with that, let's get started. Thank you everyone for being here today. You are joining a wonderful, wonderful workshop today. We have our guest speaker, guest author. We have also a Braille student among us, and her name is Yolanda Nava. She is a media pioneer in Los Angeles. She's the first Latina to appear on a network affiliate station, KNBC and TV in LA. She's an Emmy Award-winning journalist. She has anchored and reported in Los Angeles, Sacramento, on NBC, CBS, PBS stations and all or most 40 cable markets. She is a host. She's nationally syndicated as a Hispanic television magazine figure in Latino Tempo. She has garnered recognition as Entertainer of the Year. She is born and raised in Los Angeles. She is a daughter of Mexican immigrants who attended public schools. Undergraduate and graduate study, UCLA is her school, and she has a background in U.S. history. She is with us today to speak to us about two of her written treasures. The first being a book called It's All in the Frijoles. 100 famous Latinos share real-life stories, time-tested dichos, favorite folk tales, and inspiring words of wisdom. We will share a recording and ask questions upon completion. We will give the audience an opportunity to engage with Yolanda, ask her questions, and gain insight and feedback. She is with us here today, and we just want to give her a warm welcome. And please take it away, Yolanda.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. And it's delightful to be joining you for National
Margaret
Library
Rodriguez
Week.
left
And
for
I'm
and guest
delighted
right
to
for an
be
entering
talking to
lobby.
you about my first book, which was It's All in the Frijoles.
Margaret
which
Rodriguez
is a book
left
of
for and guest
Latino
right for and join the
virtues.
call.
And it won an International Latino Book Award when it came out. And it's interesting because that book came out many years ago. And yet, when you read it today, and it was just made available for BARD Talking Book Library of Talking Books program a year ago, October. And so in the last year and a half, I probably have listened to that digital recording perhaps 20 times. I love the book. And I wrote the book and I've read it, in print. But the interesting thing that happens is that books really should be listened to because it's oral tradition. And so I'm listening to this book and the reader does a great job. He's got beautiful Spanish and he's playful. He reads the children's stories, like he's talking to a child, and the serious stuff is serious. And it really is a beautiful book. And I'm saying that because the times that we've been through in these recent years have had so much terrible hate talk against Latinos. And we need to counter that with the beauty of the culture. And it is a beautiful culture, a very rich culture that goes back centuries with much wisdom that is attached to it. So I'm delighted to be here to talk about that. And I want you to ask lots of questions because it's time for that, to ask questions, to look at who we are, to re-examine our values, to look at how we're practicing the virtues. And It's All the Frijoles is really a book of virtues. And we don't talk about virtue very much these days. There's a lack of it, in fact. But the virtues are, for me, the building blocks of character. And my mother was, both my parents were Mexican born. They came to the United States separately after the Mexican Revolution in the 1920s. That's a long time ago, 100 years ago. And my mother was dedicated, a very dedicated mother. I was a child born when she was older. She was 35. They'd gone through the Depression and World War, and my father was away, and so they did choose to have children. They were married a long time, and my mother prayed for me, and she got me, and I was born on Thanksgiving Day. So that's an answer to a prayer. The virtues that are in the book are the top 5 are responsibility, respect, hard work, loyalty, faith, all the way to chastity and charity, and caridad. And these are beautiful principles, and they're very much a part of the Mexican, the Latin culture, the Spanish culture, the Spanish-speaking cultures. And they're very important because they teach us how to live and how we can engage in different situations. And they really, I've realized now in listening to the book over and over again, as I have recently, that they really could be a spiritual workshop. You know, if we really delve into them and look at how they resonate with us, and the dichos, you know, you know, there's some funny ones, you know, el consejo de la mujer es poco y el que no lo agarra es loco. You know, the advice of a woman is little, and he who doesn't pay attention is crazy, loco. So they're funny ones, and they're serious ones. They're serious ones, and maybe Eric could pull out a couple of them and read them, you know, a little bit later.
Thank you.
Instead of conflicting with the child, conflicting with the parent, because you know this is how we do things. You're giving it to somebody else. It's our culture. It is said.
Sandra Albert joined the call.
And so it becomes a tool to help parents teach their children without getting all this nasty reaction that sometimes we get, especially from teenagers. So it's different. And it also teaches the respect that children are supposed to have for parents, and that parents are supposed to have for children, and grandparents you have for grandparents and elders. And those are things that are very important in the culture. And those things are getting lost because they're not so important in the American culture, North American culture. Anyway, it's been a fascinating process to re-engage with the book, and I'm now very interested in sharing it more widely, because we have to counter all the ugly hate talk that's gone on in the last several years, and to have everybody be able to share these wonderful principles, and particularly to have Latino parents and grandparents teach their children these principles, and to have the children really absorb them and really participate. I think that writing the book was a wonderful idea. It is a story that's quite beautiful and painful at the same time. I was working for KCBS in Los Angeles, television in Los Angeles, as a news reporter and also a talk show host. I had a show called To the Point. And I was very engaged in that, and I was doing a lot of coverage on AIDS and amnesty. I was considered the A reporter, so I got AIDS and amnesty because those are the big stories that were happening every day on KCBS. And so I'm working at KCBS, and I'm also writing a weekly column for Eastern Group Publications, which at the time was the largest bilingual newspaper, community newspaper in the country. It's been it's no longer in operation now. And I was writing columns at the invitation of the managing editor. And I wrote a column about my mother, because when I was, it was the spring of 1989, and my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness and given 6 weeks to live.
Your spotlighted your video is highlighted for everyone in the meeting.
And the
Left the
story
call.
is very powerful, because I had the opportunity to be with my mother during those very difficult last 6 weeks. There was nothing that could be done for her. There was no hospice then. I took care of her at her home. And I was fortunate because, and it was a blessing, my contract expired in April with KCBS, and it wasn't renewed. And it was a blessing, because that gave me the next 5 or 6 weeks to be with my mother every day. It was hard when I was working, because I'd go there after work, which was late at night, 6:30 or something. And I had 2 children at the time.
This meeting is being
my daughter
recorded.
was 8
By
years
joining,
old,
you are giving
and my
consent for
son
this
was,
meeting to be
5 years
recorded.
older.
Privacy
And
policy.
he was gone a lot. He could get to school on his own in a carpool, but I had to drop my daughter off at school, or at childcare, depending on my work schedule. And so what I would do is I would take her to childcare, or drop her off at school once I was free. When I was able to take care of my mother, I would drop her off. I'd go to my mother's house, right after 8 o'clock, after I dropped her off, and spend the day with her and question and ask her questions and take care of her and, give her food and give her a lot of love, read her poetry, read her stories, talk to her. And people would drop by, relatives came by to say their final goodbyes. And in the process of doing all of this, I asked her one day, Mom, what's made you so strong? Because my mother was an incredible woman. And I expected to have all this advice and wisdom and, messages that would last me forever, paragraphs of wisdom. And she just said, beads have made me strong. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And it went right over my head. And I didn't understand the meaning of her very simple message. Well, she dies, 8 months go by, and I'm making frijoles de la olla, as she taught me to do. And you wash the beans, and then you sort them out on a platter, and you pick out any shriveled or discolored beads, anything that's imperfect. Because she would say one bad bead can spoil the pot.
Applications. Context escape. Leaving menus.
so
Call controls region. Meeting now.
And so she I just hit a key and it threw me off. She had taught me, to wash the beads and clean them and sort them and so that you would have a perfect pot of beads. And in the process of doing this sorting and selecting, I realized that, oh my gosh, the lights went on in my head. And I saw that was the message. The more important, the deeper message in Beads Have Made Me Strong was that the simplest acts of everyday life are what make us strong. They are the things that build character. It's called mindfulness in Buddhism, but mindfulness is the sorting of the frijoles. And that's very much a part of the culture. And I kind of think that, now that you can buy mashed canned, ready to eat frijoles, we're going to lose it all because nobody's going through that discernment. You're discerning between a good bean and a bad bean. Something that's going to add to your flavor of your delicious food, or that could spoil the pot. And so that message was what triggered in my mind. And I was working at an adult years have gone by, almost 10 years. And I had been working at a family literacy program for the adult division of LAUSD. I had worked on communications there. They placed me over at the one school to raise money for that, a nonprofit organization that we had there, and a training program that we had in family literacy called Strengthening Family Ties. It was a fabulous program. And I could go on and on about that, but I won't. And I realized in being in that environment and being exposed to students who had dropped out of high school and were now, perhaps with parents or perhaps trying to find a job, but they couldn't because they didn't have a high school diploma. They had no real training in business, or they didn't know how to do anything. And so I had this idea, well, why are these American-born students, third and fourth generation, falling through the cracks? And why are these amnesty students coming across the border from Mexico with nothing but the shirt on their back, literally? They're on the streets selling oranges or flowers. They're coming to school and preparing for the amnesty program. We had 24-hour-a-day programs then. And so you could come morning, noon, or night all day long for 24 hours to help become amnesty, obtain your amnesty as an immigrant. And I'm going, why is there this discrepancy between American-born Latinos? Now, granted, the population that we had was largely from public housing project. And there are people in public housing projects who succeed and supersede. And I've met them, I've known them. They've gone to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. But in this case, I was seeing that a flood of students who were US-born citizens who didn't have the same preparation. They didn't have the virtues. That's what I figured out. And that's why I wrote the book. So it's, I want Erica to ask some questions, but that's why I wrote the book, was to share these principles of living and how to live. And it's not just for Latinos. Everybody, all great cultures, all the cultures, the ethnic cultures, all have virtues, and they all teach them. But people come to this country and we have a different standard here. It's a different language, and people are expected to assimilate. And oftentimes we're not any longer in schools teaching character. We're not teaching virtues. We're not teaching values. And that is a loss, I think. And so I was trying to make up for that in the writing of the book, which came out in 2000. So why don't you ask me a question, Erica, and then we'll go on from there.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure to let our participants know that Yolanda Nava has extensive experience in multiple disciplines. And so thank you for sharing, Yolanda. Now, I know that is part of your research, part of your life experiences, part of your professional experiences, and going back to the book. Now, aside from all of these wonderful virtues that you describe in the book, tell us a little bit about your process in interviewing certain individuals and capturing their stories and then sharing them with us throughout Frijoles.
Well, it was a wonderful process because as a journalist, I was used to interviewing people. And because I had so much exposure, I'd been a political wife. I had 2 children. I had met a lot of celebrities. I'd met a lot of very famous people, luminaries, and the people that are in the book are all luminaries nationally and internationally. And so I had the idea that I would interview people, and I didn't know how to do that in this way, you know, prepare for the book. So I had to learn everything and find different strategies. And I was helped by a friend to learn how you could, you know, audio tape somebody on the telephone. Attorneys do it all the time for their clients, you know, to get their case bill. And so I learned how to do that. You get permission, of course. And just as you announced, you're going to record this event. And I contacted people through their managers, or I contacted them personally if I knew them. And I have people like Isabel Allende, the author, the internationally renowned author, Edward James Olmos, who's a major television and film star. You know, Alma Martinez. I just did a Zoom event with her for my new YouTube program, Do You See What I See? And I have 70 people that I interviewed. And these were about 45-minute or 1 hour long interviews that I then learned, instead of trying to foot pedal and do the transcription myself, to drop the little micro tapes, cassette tapes. That's how we worked then, back in the 1990s, late 90s. I took those, and it was just synchronicity. I was at the After SAG theater at an event, and I was walking back to the
Mary
place,
Jensen's left paren, guest
and
right
I saw
paren
that
entering
there was
lobby.
a secretarial service that
Mary
would
Jensen's
download,
left
and
paren,
then
guest right
you
paren
could
join the call.
put it on your, they would email it to me. I would then download it. This is early on, you know, I didn't know all this stuff. Download, and then I would pull it up as you know, as separate interviews, and then I could go in and edit them, shorten them down, and then I built my chapters 1 through 14, each being a different virtue. And it was a funny process because for the stories and the poems and the songs, the children's stories and the poems and the songs and the dichos, I had to do a lot of research because I'm not a Latin American literature major. I'm a U.S. history major. And I would go to the Pasadena Central Library where I first presented the book. That was a fabulous event. And I would go to that library because I was living in South Pass at the time. And I would, you know, be looking through the stacks. I would get, you know, how you go to the library to get all those codes and numbers, and I'd write them down. I'd go to the section of the stacks. I love stacks. And, you know, I'd be looking up there, you know, at all these numbers. I could see that I was cited when I wrote my first book and my second book. And I would, you know, what book do I pick? You know, I want Latin American literature. You know, what book do I pick? And all of a sudden, a book would fall down, you know, open up on the floor, and I'd look down. It would happen to be a story or something that I could use for the chapter that I was working on. It was an amazing, magical process. So there's a lot of synchronicity in writing that I think we can learn to look for. Those special encounters and events, like the magic of a book falling, you know, it all just missed my foot. If it hit the foot, it was a damn heavy book. But the process was sometimes very intuitive. And somehow I've always been guided in my writing, just as I was guided in the Through the Dark, which is a new book that I've written blind. But that process was really wonderful. And so I was integrating the first account stories of how people learned the virtues growing up through the interview process. And then I would weave in stories, songs, poems, and proverbs that would, and I ended each chapter with proverbs. So I had a structure that I followed through the book. And I began with quotes about ideas that were pertinent to the particular virtue. And then I would start with how my mother taught me that particular virtue. So it's really charming. It's a lovely and very charming book. And again, it won an award it was spirituality, self-help, and inspiration. And the category that they had in those days was self-help. So it won a best self-help book award because it is inspirational and it is very spiritual. Again, they're principles, and principle is what we have to live by. So that was that part of the process in putting it together. And then I would go in and I'll do a lot of editing. And I started learning how to use a computer in 1991. So I wasn't raised with it like a lot of people today. And so it was, it was hard work to do all of that work in a computer and to play between the interviews that were recorded and then downloaded and all of the other materials I was working with. And I was fortunate at that time to be working on a laptop and have a desktop computer. And I had a printer. I had it all set up. I made my son's room when he went off to college into my office. And I had a beautiful view out that window and looking over the garden and, kind of a hilltop view over and out. And so I was able to work, and it was a beautiful process. You have to get first you have to get a literary agent. You have to get a book contract, and then you're given a specific amount of time to fulfill your contract. I had 18 months. The first step is you have to write a book proposal, and I didn't know how to do that, so I had to read a book and learn how to do that to submit, so the literary agent could submit. I'm going to back up a bit because I was very fortunate going back to my writing the columns for It's All of the Easter Group publications. I wrote a column. I'm writing poetry now, so I'm thinking in two directions. I wrote a column called Mother's Deathbed Wisdom about the story of the frijoles that I shared with you, asking my mother what had made her so strong. And that column ran in Easter Group Publications. And I was going to have a meeting at the LA Times with Frank Delovo, who was the editorial board there in those days. And I was going to take a bunch of my columns in so that, I could possibly get picked up there. And at the last minute, my editor at Easter Group said, take this column, The Mother's Deathbed Wisdom. So I took that with me for my lunch with Frank Delovo. And I had lunch with him, I think, on a Wednesday. And on Saturday, my column was printed in the Los Angeles Times. So it was very exciting. And that column led a literary agent to call me. That doesn't happen very often. And you have to go out and seek these things by going to book conferences and different events like that. And she called me and she said, I want to have lunch with you. And when we had lunch, she says, I want to represent you. What do you want to write? So there was a lot of magic going on. It was meant to be. And I found that, of course, across the decades of my life, I have really been guided. I've been a woman of tremendous faith all my life. And of course, this book is about virtues. One of the top 5 is faith. And that's a beautiful chapter. And I was guided, and I, had what I have a saying to myself, and I use it now a lot. What is needed comes, and it has come to me, because when you're in alignment with being of service and trying to live at your highest level, to be of purpose and on purpose and fulfill your own purpose, because we all have a purpose.
Jose left paren guest right paren entering lobby.
We all have
Jose left paren guest right paren join the
gifts
call.
and talents that we need to discover and develop and then give back to the world. So I was in my purpose, and things just came together and flowed beautifully. I was guided. I had a friend who showed me how to use the computer and how to do these downloads and everything else. And the book was written. I made my deadline. I submitted everything in 18 months, and Frijoles was published. So that's the process of putting it together. It's a lot of work. It was a 2-hour long process because it took me about 6 months of hard work, diligent work to write the book proposal, because there are certain categories you have to follow. And there are books on that, so you could look those up in the library. And then I had to write the book, and you have to submit on time. So you have to be able to work to deadlines. And I was used to that being a journalist and writing columns. So that was good training and prep for that.
Thank you, Yolanda. Wonderful. And just going back to what you mentioned earlier, magic, which is simply a one-word summation of this literary work of art that you have essentially released into the world to light our paths and our walk and find our purpose in life and these virtues. Now, in writing this book, what were your significant challenges, and also what was significantly pleasant or overall a pleasant experience about writing the book?
Well, that book was really a blessing. It was because it was honoring my mother. And it was 10 years after she passed that I submitted it for publication. I started broadly working on that in 1997, probably with a proposal. And then I got a contract in probably 1998, and it was published in 2000. So yeah, that's about right. It was all, at first it was difficult because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to record. I didn't know how to, use a cassette MIDI player. I didn't use that in my work. As a journalist, we always had video and audio that was done, camera people. And so it was figuring out how I was going to go about doing it. And then once I got into it, it just started moving through me. And like I say, the research, the information, everybody that I invited to be interviewed said yes. I was cold calling people like Hector Elizondo and Soledad O'Brien. I mean, I was cold calling people, and I had an advantage with Soledad because I was a fellow journalist, and we had an affinity just immediately on that basis. But I had to reach out to people. Isabel Allende, I had never met her, and I really wanted her. And she was so gracious. She accepted my invitation. I didn't have a contract yet when I interviewed her, and she was my first significant interview, and I really needed her. It would help the book proposal. And she invited me to her home in Sausalito, where she was living at the time. And I got to go in there, and it was just an amazing experience, just a gracious, wonderful person. And since that time, I have interviewed her a few times and introduced her at the National Hispanic Cultural Center when I was living in New Mexico years later. And there's been an affinity. And the other interesting thing that happened out of that interview, and I again, it's a blessing. I think it was in 2006. I was honored by being included in a remarkable women's exhibit, Latinas on the Move, that was presented at the Museum of Women History and the Arts in Sacramento, California. And I could have been in the media section, but you know where they put me? They put me in the writers section next to Isabel Allende as the two California Latina writers that they were presenting at that exhibit. So that was an incredible honor for me. And again, I've interviewed her when I was on PBS and with one of her books, Aphrodite, and again, in different situations. So you never know what these, when you reach out to people, don't be afraid to go and ask questions and reach out to whoever you want to interview or talk to. Or when you want to write a book and you don't know everything about it, it's not necessary. You research, you study, you learn. I did. I had to gather up literature. I didn't know Latin American literature. I knew some Mexican authors. I knew Jorge Luis Borges from Argentina. but I didn't know the gamut, and I learned so much. Violeta Parra, the song, there's a song that is sung by famous singers, and her lyrics that are just so powerful and beautiful. So it's a learning process. And so when you're curious, if you're going to be a writer, you need to be curious. You need to be able to do research. You need to be able to really, kind of keep your, feet to the ground and work. It is a lot of work. And when you write, the idea is not to think you're going to write the perfect sentence. I'm going to, okay, from the beginning to end, you're going to write every sentence is going to be perfect. No, the idea is to outline it, to think it through, to talk about with yourself, what am I trying to accomplish here? What do I want to say here? And then when you sit down to write, I've never been totally disciplined on that, but when I sit down to write, I don't try to write the perfect sentence. The idea is to just get your thoughts down. And then the real work of writing is in the editing, the polishing, the editing, the re-editing, the re-editing. It might take
5 participants joined the call.
And so the idea is that it's a process, and it's a constant learning process, because we don't know everything, especially when you write your first book. And even when you write your third book, I still learn all the time new things. I'm having to now continue to struggle with the computer, because it changes every 5 minutes. I just learned something and I have to learn something else, and they change it. And the machine throws the letters forward 3 or 4 or 5 words, and then I have to go back and clean it up. It's not easy. And so but it does take diligence, and that's part of what's in the frijoles. And so I'm glad I learned to have fortitude and learn to have perseverance, to be diligent about these things. And so that's part of the process. So it was, it came together, and the real work again is in the editing. I was so pleased with the editing that I did on myself, because I went over it several times. And then I did, before I turned it into Simon & Schuster, they were going to have a professional editor, of course. But I wanted it perfect, letter perfect. And so I hired a professional editor to go through and make sure I had the right commas and, everything was perfect. And when I submitted it, the only comment that the Simon & Schuster editors made about It's All in the Frijoles was in the chastity chapter, it was in red ink, I think. Isn't this a little archaic in the year 2000? That was the only comment in the whole book. So it was clean. And that's an interesting comment, because I had initially was going to end the book with the chastity chapter, and I ended up switching it and ending with caridad, the love, caridad, compassion chapter. And I turned the chastity chapter into the second to the last. But I ended up, because of that comment, isn't this archaic? And I ended up it was around Thanksgiving time, and I went to 2 or 3 family functions, and we had family members from 27 to maybe 80 something. And the men were more adamant about chastity than the women. And it was just interesting. So we talked about it, and I ended up making my chapter stronger in favor of chastity, because chastity is, it's kind of pureness of spirit and body. Thou shalt not commit adultery. You're supposed to, keep relations within the marital bounds. You're not supposed to commit adultery, for example. That's a no-no in every single culture on the planet Earth, because it causes violence, and people can kill each other and can create long-time animosity and tensions in communities. So that's why that was instituted way back when. But I made it stronger. And the chapter really has turned out well. And that's one chapter that gets a lot of controversy. A lot of people ask questions. Well, the
Guest left the call.
But
Guest left the call.
It is it's something to think about. And I swapped again. I swapped sides, and I ended up with the last chapter, which winds up with Tony Anaya, the former governor of New Mexico, and his story kind of recaps my mother's story, because his story is his grandmother's passing and the wisdom that she left him. So it's a beautiful beginning and a beautiful wind up and ending. But that's how it works. It takes a lot of work.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your challenges and then also the highlights in your writing process. Yolanda, I'm sure that's appreciated. Many of our participants today are interested in learning your process, especially since your experience has been so unique. Now, it's all in the frijoles, is in our Braille collection, and you may request that after the meeting. So just to let people know that it is available via audiobook in our collection. Also, something to consider and keep in mind is that Yolanda is talking to us about writing this wonderful work with her vision intact. Now, that is very interesting and also different from a book she wrote most recently, which was after the fact of having lost her sight. Now, before we get to that point, Yolanda, I wanted to ask, and others may be curious as well, how did you get in contact with Braille? I know that when you and I met, I did have the pleasure of meeting you in person. We talked about your experience in orientation and mobility at the Santa Barbara Center quite some time ago, and the experience that you had, quite novel, right, in learning about mobility in general, and how you were able to essentially advocate for yourself and others in the community to keep the community safe with something very simple, but also complicated, uh, like getting a crosswalk installed.
An audio signal.
An audio signal, right, right. So can you tell us about your journey through Braille since then? What skills you have acquired to help you in your everyday life, so for daily living skills, but also for your professional, for your own professional growth and development.
I was very fortunate. I was in New Mexico when I lost my sight. And the New Mexico Commission for the Blind was fantastic. And they started me off with at-home training because I lived in the country, rural. And they started me off with a mobility teacher who himself was blind, and he was driven to my home. And he started training me. And that was kind of fun because because he had a driver, I would say, well, let me take you into town. You know, I wanted to, well, I wanted to go to Macy's. I needed to buy some bras, right? And here I have these two guys, right? My mobility teacher. And so I said, well, show me how to use the escalator so I could get to Macy's and I could go to the different stores in the shopping mall that was in town in Santa Fe at the far end of town, way on the other end where I live. And so these two guys, you know, took me, and I'm on trying and doing what I had to do. And oh, they had a ball, you know, they loved it. But anyway, it was, and then I would take them to the downtown part of Santa Fe because I knew by Santa Fe, you know, I'd been sighted there for years. And so I said, you know, park down here. We're going to walk across Guadalupe Street. We're going to go up St. Francis. We're going to walk past all these fabulous shops. We're going to go past the plaza in Santa Fe. We're going to go towards the cathedral. That's how I could reference, you know, the sighted guide and help us, you know, keep us on track. And I knew the feel of the town so well. I knew where the Woolworths was. I knew where the ice cream shops was. I knew where the restaurants were, and the bookstore, and, you know, Collective Works bookstore that's there. And my favorite store was Origins at that time. And they now have moved up from St. Francis Street over to the rail yard, which is the new popular place to shop. But the old Santa Fe was what I loved so much. And so I walked them around, you know, and I think I impressed them with my recollection of, you know, of the streets and all of that. And then they helped me learn how to navigate, you know, how do you, there aren't signals right around the plaza. So how do you listen, you know, for a car, and how do you indicate that you're going to cross and do all of these things? So I got early mobility, and then I was sent to excuse me, I was sent to an independence training program. I'm not going to say where, and I call it boot camp in the book. And that was very different kind of mobility training. It wasn't touchy-feely. It was really tough. And you were sent off and given kind of halfway directions, and I would always end up in the wrong place. and,
Oh,
and so, well, you made a wrong turn. Why weren't you where I told you to be? And I said, you made a wrong turn. At the bus stop, I said, you didn't mention any bus stop. I didn't know any bus stop was there. How would I know? Unless somebody taught me. And so anyway, it's kind of funny, but the I did it was a live-in. You were on site for 9-10 months, and then I came back to California, to New Mexico, and then California. So when I came to California, one of the reasons that I moved to the desert, I had a friend who offered me, to start out there at her house and get settled in the community and see if I wanted to stay with her, if I wanted to, move into my own place. And it was just perfect because I really wasn't ready to live on my own at that point. And one of the reasons I chose to live in the desert was because they had the Braille Institute in Rancho Mirage at that time. And I said, oh, this is fabulous. So I called them up. The only downside was I had been trained on window eyes on the computer. I loved window eyes. It worked. I don't have any errors in window eyes. JAWS is iffy, quite frankly. But JAWS is the only program they use at the Braille Institute. And in California, that is the approved software, audio software for the blind. So that's what we use here. So I had to get retrained on JAWS. So I took my emphasis was to get my computer skills back. So I took computer classes, and then I took more mobility. And it was in taking the mobility when I navigated my own neighborhood here where I live in the desert. I live a half a mile from a major shopping center where they have my bank, they have manicure, they have chiropractor, they have a beautiful French bakery, they've got great restaurants, they've got a Starbucks, they got the Vons, they got all these different stores. And it's half a mile away from me. And I love to walk and hike. And that's what I used to do when I was sighted in Santa Fe. And so I told my mobility teacher, okay, train me how to cross this highway, how to walk, and how do I get across the bridge and this is that, the driveways and all that to get over to the shopping center. And so we started that training, and I recorded at that time. I was using my VCR, my Victor Reader Stream, and I recorded the route because how was I going to remember all this stuff? This and that, and the rocks and a bridge and a wall, and there's just all these different things. And I wasn't familiar with the terrain at all. It wasn't like going back to your neighborhood and just refamiliarizing yourself. It was totally new territory. And the same thing around the center. I never clearly understood. It was kind of an H-shaped center. I never really understood how all that worked. But you had rails that you could follow yourself around. And the worst thing that would happen is you would get lost, and you could call the front desk if you had to. But I usually figured it out somehow. Just wandered until I found some, person again. But when my teacher, mobility teacher at the Braille and Rancho Mirage, said, you can do this highway, Yolanda. I mean, you're capable of walking across the highway, but Yolanda, it's not safe for you. There's no audio signal here. And so I said, well, let's do this. I need to do this. I like to walk. I need to be out of doors, and I need to get shopping, and I need to do my errands. And I could walk over there, and then I could get a ride with, the access services and come back. So that's what I do every week. And so department, that takes care of the signal. And I will follow up phone call. I'll get you the information. I'll do all the follow up with him to advocate for myself and for the 130 people that live in my development, because they're older people, over 55 community, and they need an audio signal. They're not all blind, but even as you get older, you need to know how long you got to cross the street.
absolutely.
Yeah. So the exercise has been fascinating. It's all learning. But I did champion myself. I did advocate for the signal. I got it. At first he said, well, gosh, Yolanda, I'm sighted. I wouldn't want to cross that highway. And I said, well, that's your choice, but I need to cross the highway. I have to be able to be independent and mobile and do what I need to do. And our residents need to have some support to cross because, you know, some of them are in their 80s and 90s and they may want to cross and take a walk because there's a golf path there, a walking path, a bicycle path. And it's quite pretty. It meanders and, you know, there are birds in the trees. It's just where I live is very pretty, surrounded with lots of trees and stuff. And so the birds sing and you have a half a mile of nice terrain to walk. It's flat sidewalk. It's all perfect. The only problem is the highway. And when you get close to the mountain that's there, big Cliff House Mountain, there's a restaurant that's built against the mountain. It was terrifying at first. Terrified because I'd be reaching the point where I was going to turn and go across the veterinarian's building and then cross another driveway and parking lot over the Vaughn Shopping Center, which of course would be easier because it's all, you know, paved sidewalk.
Right.
And I would approach that mountain and oh my goodness, I mean, Erica, the volume of the cars traveling at, you know, they shouldn't be going that fast, but they were probably doing 75 if they were doing anything. Vroom, vroom. And then you get the big truck and you get the boom boxes and you get people talking loud on their cell phone and all that carries with this echo. And at first I was terrified. I was terrified.
Oh
How do I do this? How do I do this? Because when you're blind, I'm total,
right.
I'm not impaired. When you're total, your ears pick up everything more intensely.
Yes.
And I'm drawn towards noise. I'm drawn towards voices, not necessarily stay on my course. So I'm hearing this noise and I had to really be attentive and try to just focus. Okay, my shoreline is here. I got to follow the shoreline. I've got to get down to this grate. I might hit a post, you know, and if I'm going too fast, I might slam into the post. So I don't want to do that. And so when I hit that grate, I knew I could turn around, go up a little bit and then take the pathway over because I couldn't feel the path with my cane when I was coming towards that path to turn right. I had to go down to the grate and then come back to the path and cross. So there are all these little tricks that you have to learn. And
2 participants
my teacher
left the
taught me
call.
that. So it's a challenge, but you know, we can do it. We can learn it. And I always advocate that people who are starting to lose sight, don't wait till you're blind. Don't wait till you're seriously impaired. Start getting some training so that you can use your computer, you can use your tools, you can, you know, do your mobility, you'll be able to cook. I do all of that. I cook every day. That you could iron, that you could do, you know, sort your clothes and do all these things that you have to do. Don't wait. Because it's really not the worst thing in the world, I tell people. Some people say, oh gosh, if I lost my sight, I had friends that tell me this. If I lost my sight, I go into my bedroom and never come out. I said, no, you can't do that. You got to live your life. And so that's how I have, you know, dealt with it is you just do what you got to do. And I had these goals of, you know, I was on a board. I had to raise money. I had to do what I had to do. I had to attend meetings. I had to travel to LA. I had to get myself there. I had to learn how to use Access. I had to do all these other things. And I had to learn how to use all this technology to write my new book, which I had started 6 months after getting out of the hospital.
Karen D. Lopez joined the call.
So, you know, it's all a learning curve. And the Braille has been wonderful. And I saw that Siren came into the call. And Siren is at the library in Los Angeles, the Braille Library at Los Angeles. And I call upon them to send me the digital audio books. And I read prolifically. I mean, sometimes she sent me one disc with 36 books on it, I think. I read all of them probably once or twice. When I read out of books, I just would go back and repeat. And I often like to reread books because I read going to sleep and in the middle of the night. The nice thing about the machine is that you could set it for 15 or 30 minutes so you could fall asleep and wake up and rewind and get back to the point exactly where you left off.
Yes.
And so I read and reread. And so there's a lot of, you know, the classes that Braille has are wonderful. And there are other centers in San Diego. I think they have different names. In San Francisco, they have the Lighthouse for the Blind. And I visited there. My children live up there. So I would go there. And I would borrow books from the library up in San Francisco when I'm at my son's home. And I would have the digital recorder up there so I could continue to read my books in a different city. So I've used the tools, I've used the resources at the Braille Institute, which have been wonderful. And the community also, that you are in a community of learners. And that makes it fun. And, you're getting yourself to and from this new other location. So I've really benefited from it. And I also dropped in at the Braille in Santa Barbara because I stayed with a girlfriend up there for about a month after I got out of the independent study program I went away to. And they trained me on the streets of Santa Barbara, and I loved it. They were very good training teachers up there, and very good facility. So there are resources, and we need to use them.
Thank you, Yolanda. That is so empowering and inspirational to those of us who are starting our journey with Braille, or perhaps have been on the same journey for quite some time. You're really, really bringing home the point that lifelong learning, persistence, determination is key, and a better quality of life is possible with or without sight. Now, without further ado, you did mention independent living, and one thing that you mentioned that caught my attention was, being able to sort your own closet, essentially. And I would like to describe the beautiful outfit that you're wearing today for our participants who are not able to see what you are wearing. Yolanda Nava is wearing this beautiful traditional white shirt with a beautiful border pattern all around the neckline. And it's embroidery, traditional of Mexican culture, and it's blue, a beautiful like sea blue, and the embroidery has several colors that look like dots on them, textured looking dots, some big, some small. I see yellow, I see blue, I see pink.
There's purple and red.
Purple. Okay,
But I
red.
think we have ribbon on the trim here that's turquoise.
Yes, and she's wearing these
There's
she's wearing these beautiful dangling earrings, and her hair is done up nicely. And just to give you sort of perspective or an idea of how colorful her writing and her philosophy is. And I wanted to segue into one of your chapters in the It's All the Frijoles book, Yolanda. And this is chapter number 12. This is the Fortitude chapter. It will be read out loud on the BARD application, and it'll be in English and in Spanish. All Spanish reading will be dichos, yes, or sayings will be translated into English by the reader. We will begin now.
Lisa. Donde hay voluntad, hay modo. Where there is a will, there is a way. There is no substitute for persistence. It overrides everything. Andy Garcia, actor. Roma no se construyó en un día. Rome wasn't built in a day. Cervantes, Don Quixote. La constancia hace milagros. Consistency creates miracles. Action is the antidote to despair. Joan Baez. Sí se puede. Yes, you can. Cesar Chavez, President,
+1 714-679-4284 entering lobby.
God, give me patience with this girl. How often I heard Mama repeat this call for help. I can remember her uttering these words whenever I would ask too many challenging questions or begin to provoke her with irksome behavior, as only children can do. Her prayers must have been heard, because my mother was a paragon of moral strength and endurance.
Participants left call.
She literally exuded patience, calmness, and stability. She was my rock and anchor. Everything about her, including her persistent courage in trying circumstances and her calmness, came from this virtue. She taught me never to put off until tomorrow what you could do today. Lo que se ha de hacer tarde, que se haga temprano.
6881 left the
Even the
call.
way she made her frijoles demonstrated patience, although, until now, I never looked at it in this way. Yes, while making her frijoles de la olla, spreading out the beans on a tray and washing them while carefully picking out the grit and shriveled, imperfect beans with such care, Mama was exercising fortaleza, fortitude. Strength and tenacity were her middle name. And through all the travails of her often painful and difficult life, she exhibited a courage and strength of character in the midst of pain, affliction, and hardship. It is a characteristic we often see manifested in the best of our women, la fortaleza. As I think about the many lessons of life she gave to me in her sunlit kitchen, I realize that the exercise of patience, of taking care in the accomplishment of a task, is part of learning how to be a good cook. It is the proper paring of apples or pumpkins for empanadas, the seemingly endless beating of the egg whites to peak perfection for meringue, or chiles rellenos, the scraping of the chiles to make the sauce for enchiladas or tamales. All these acts of preparation are a metaphor for living successfully. Her words, con paciencia se gana lo imposible. With patience, you can win the impossible. When I impatiently looked into the pot or into the oven, still ring in my ears. Good food, like a good life, doesn't just happen. It takes planning. Do I have a good recipe? Preparation, the right ingredients, and mindfulness. Am I in a loving mood so that the meal is delicious? Of course, we can improvise at times with great success. But first, we must know the basic rules, the recipes of the kitchen and for living. How often do we try to replicate a wonderful recipe and forget a key ingredient or burn the meal? A bad bean can spoil the pot, Mama always said. How true this is in life. Mama also looked to God for nourishment, and indeed, He was the source of her strength. Her fortitude came from her faith. I can remember her teaching me the 23rd Psalm to remember whenever the going was rough or when I was afraid. These words are among the first that come to mind today whenever I face a difficult challenge. Mama's determination was also an important part of the equation. As the Spanish mystic Saint Teresa de Avila said, I decided it is tremendously important to begin with great determination.
Participants
The
left the
soul
call.
that begins with determination has already traveled a great part of the way. Perfection is not easy to achieve, but we must seek to do and be our best. Even in the simplest of tasks, in the most ordinary daily activities, we can develop ourselves, our inner strength, and our potential. We have a model for doing things well, for doing our best, for rooting out all the little negative traits and habits, as my mother used to say, in the making of the frijoles. One of the common themes among the many remarkable people whom I interviewed was how the fortitude of a parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent influenced their lives. It was often the mother or grandmother who was the source of stability and love for the entire family. In that stoicism and strength amidst adversity, turmoil, and even violence, we learn a powerful lesson. No matter what befalls us, we can overcome and perhaps transcend the situation. Without this sense of the ability to overcome, we are like flotsam in the waves, or a ship without a captain. La fortaleza gives us power. Ten paciencia, mijita. Ten paciencia. Have patience, my little daughter. Have patience. A aquel que esperar puede, todo a su tiempo y voluntad le viene. Everything willingly comes to one who waits. This was Mama's message to me. It is a life lesson I am still trying to master. Patience. Patience and determination. I can still hear Mama saying these words. El hombre propone. Dios dispone. Man proposes. God disposes. Knowing this gives us strength for the journey. Jesus Treviño, director, activist. I think fortitude is part of our culture. It's been called a macho code, but I don't think it's just about males. I think it's about people. Fortitude emerges when something happens and the person has the attitude, me encabran. I'm going to do it anyway, damn it. It's resilience in the face of adversity. I know I got this straight from my mother. My mother came from Juarez, Mexico, when she was 15 to work in the Woolworths in El Paso, knowing barely any English. When she was asked if she knew the language, she lied and said, "Yes, I do." Then she proceeded to memorize the English words for items in the store, getting help from the Mexican American girls who worked there. They taught her how to speak enough English so she could be a sales clerk. She helped to support her family across the border and worked all her life, as did my father. They loved their kids and provided for us. Fortitude is just saying, we have to do this. It's reinforced by our culture, but sometimes it's also reinforced by the fact you have no other options. When you
And that was chapter 12, which is the chapter of fortitude in Yolanda Nava's book, It's All in the Frijoles.
I love
Oh,
that.
that's amazing. That's great.
I love
That's a
it.
great
I
book.
love it.
Now, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. And I want to have enough time to provide that to our participants. Before we start taking questions, I wanted to segue also into your newest book, Yolanda. It is called Through the Dark. I wanted you to say a few words about it, and then I would be reading one of the chapters called Angels and Omens. Can you introduce this new book, Through the Dark, and then tell us a little bit about the chapter that we're about to embark on?
Well, Through the Dark is my journey in losing sight suddenly and coming to thrive. It's for anybody, and so many have in these last couple of years gone through many cataclysmic, traumatic, life-changing events, and life happens. It happens, and my sight went literally within a matter of 3.5 weeks. I was very, very sick. The autoimmune illness that they ultimately diagnosed
Two
once I got to the
participants
hospital
left the
in
call.
Los Angeles uh, nearly claimed my life. So I was very, very ill. I started writing the book 6 months after I got out of the hospital in the midst of all kinds of cataclysmic changes. I went through a divorce. I wasn't working, obviously, and my contract had come to an end, and the governor I was appointed by was going to be leaving. So I was also going to be leaving and transitioning, but I got sick, so I couldn't go back to work again. And everything was literally thrown up in the air as if a rug had been pulled out from under me. So I wanted to write about this because I knew that I was having experiences seeing what was going on. Like this, the second eye went over 3 days. And I describe it in the book. I won't do it again here, but I was aware that I was experiencing the loss of sight and my daily life through the journalist's eye. Because as a journalist, you learn to observe, and you know that there are different points of view from which you could approach any subject. And so I was having that experience with the blindness. I called it the blindness. And so I wanted to share this awareness, and and I knew I was going to come through this because I had a wonderful new friend, that I called her my coach, that came into my life, and she was very helpful to me, and she wanted to bring me back to my same capable self. I had a pretty remarkable life, and so she took it upon herself to help me get back to myself, to be prepared to go into board meetings that I had to go through and make people feel comfortable and all the rest of it, and to travel. And I move around a lot. I've been to a couple of countries blind, and I went to one of them alone. I went back to Mexico alone, and it's you could do anything that you need to do. You just have to figure it out, and you have to want to do it. And so I started writing the book, as I say, in longhand, and then I had a volunteer read it to me, and then I made corrections, and then she marked it in red on the spiral notebooks that we were using. And then she read me everything. I had 10 spiral notebooks, and she read it to me, and I typed it into the computer using my audio software for the blind. I was using Windows at the time. And I created chapters out of these notebooks. And then I was able to edit from that. It's taken a long time because I had to learn 2 different programs. I had to do all kinds of changes, in my life, and move and do this and that. But the process of the writing was really what kept me on target all the time. And it allowed me to have constant goals, self-goals. And I was passionate about writing this book. And it was a journey. It started out one way. I was going to have lessons in the book, and I ended up taking those out. I'll probably use them as a workbook or a separate book of some kind. And so I just wanted to tell the story, and it's very dramatic, and it's tight, and it moves quickly. It's received outstanding early praise from authors. And what I'm really excited about is that the men love the book. And that's good news, because that means it's going to have the widest audience possible. And that's what one can expect, to have a book, because it's a book that can have tremendous impact on many, many people. Because at some point, we're all going to have some maybe more than one or more traumatic life events that might hit us, and they can either knock you down, or you learn to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move forward. And so it's that kind of a book, that kind of a story. And it's there's a lot of dialogue in it, which I didn't start with. And I did some self-research on myself as to how people saw me, how my doctor saw me, how others saw me. And that becomes part of the book in terms of conversations that provide, through dialogue, information and story that becomes very valuable to the journey that one is going through in writing this kind of a book. So it's been an interesting process. Came out last year, and I've done a lot of Zooms, to get the word out. I'm not physically traveling because we haven't been doing that. And I've done some libraries in person before COVID, and in anticipation of its publication. And I will continue to do things live as I can, now that COVID seems to be being better managed, and people are getting vaccinated, and we're able to protect one another. So it's been a journey and a process.
Thank you for that introduction to the new book, Through the Dark. It is available in English, and I understand that you are working on the transcribing and editing version of the book in Spanish as well. Frijoles is more of a bilingual work, and that's available in print, and as mentioned earlier, in our audiobook library at Braille and through Bard. Without further ado, we will listen to the Angels and Omens chapter, by Yolanda Nava, and it starts like this. Make yourself familiar with the angels and behold them frequently in spirit. Though you cannot see them, they are present with you. And that's by St. Francis of Sales.
2 participants left the call.
A 14th century monk. The garden was awakening after its winter sleep. Blankets of snow were melting away. New life was blossoming. Outdoors, where Julie had taken me, tulips were blooming in the raised bed by the driveway. I grazed their petals with the backs of my hands. I pressed their cool leaves gently between my fingers and saw their magnificent shades of red in my mind's eye. We crossed the portal out onto the brick patio, then across the lawn that stretched towards its horizon, where it met a 4-foot arc of flowers and bushes. Further on, a split rail fence separated a garden bed from a 2-acre pasture where a stand of leafless trees opened to a distant view I knew was stunning of the Sangre de Cristo mountains. My 2 horses are out there grazing, Julie said. There's a stillness in this moment, when sorrow and peace comes, where weeds break wildly from the dirt as the cold breaks, and spring brings with it new life and new work. Julie had all the garden tools ready and handed them to me. They were all I needed to begin the weeding. It was comfortable to be on my knees. I have my hands in the dirt again, working the rough spots with the spade and a firm turn of my wrist. To see the worms writhe in the fresh dirt exposed to the sunlight as I dug the weeds out from their roots. In the middle of the night, I heard noises on the roof, Julie said, as if someone was walking on it. In the morning, I walked outside to have my cigarette and coffee, and there was a large broken egg on my doormat. How odd, I thought. Have some kids thrown eggs at my door? Then I looked out and saw a large female peacock strutting around the front garden and on the grounds. She said, "Looks like she found her way through the iron gate into the front garden somehow, and now she's in your library." "What?" I said. "Yes, you have a peacock in the library." "How wonderful!" I exclaimed. "We have a peacock on the premises." "That's all I need, more poop to clean up," said Julie. 2 cats, 2 horses, and now a pooping peacock. We both had a good laugh. It felt good to be in my garden, talking with my friend, turning the dark soil in my hands. Its matter beneath the bed's surface giving way to the bugs and worms I imagined decaying and releasing nutrients in the earth they writhed in. I needed a drink of water and headed for the house, but I drifted off course and arrived at the schoolroom door. Julie had warned me. "Avoid that area," she said. "When Flynn was getting ready to go, he cleared out the schoolroom, and now there's a big mass of furniture and stuff outside on the portal. I don't want you to trip or fall into that mess and get hurt." I corrected myself and moved around some vine growing up a column and went into the house. When I emerged, Julie approached me. There was anxiety in her voice. "I was panicked," she said. "Why? What happened?" "The peacock was leaving the schoolroom as you approached the doors," Julie said. "She must have been 6 inches away from you. You, of course, were oblivious and could easily have bumped into her and frightened her. She could have squawked at you or pecked at you if she felt threatened. I thought you might trip and fall if she did. But the most amazing thing happened." "What was that?" I asked. "Well, she just carefully backed away from you, as if knowing you couldn't see. She didn't want to frighten you. It was like she was protecting you. She just made some more space for you before she walked through the gate, down the driveway, and away from the property." Julie paused. "Well, I think that's a good omen," she said. "Like a phoenix," I said, "that rises out of the ashes." And that was Angels and Omens. That was revised on June 14th, 2020 from Yolanda Nava's newest book, Through the Dark. I wanted to open up our space for our participants to ask questions to Yolanda Nava in regards to either of her readings, her professional experience, her amazing accolades, and please, questions, comments.
All right, Yolanda, my name is Fabian Castillo. I'm so very blessed. I'm sure give you my support. I do admire you, whatever you do. I understand it's very hard. I know you lost a sight. I know you're such a great author. I know you wrote these 2 new books. The first book, what's the first book? Los Frijoles.
That's the first book I was cited, yeah.
Yeah, and the second book, what's it called?
Through the Dark. Through the Dark.
Through the Dark. I'm interested on those 2 books. I would like to request it to the Braille Library. I'm a part of the Library Congress patron, so I will order it through the Braille Library Congress. So you're such a blessed, amazing journalist. I know you're such a great writer to your journal. I'm so blessed. I'm proud of you, Yolanda.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Yolanda Nava, I know you wrote these 2 books. It's now available in Braille Library. That's great.
Yeah, the first one is.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. Thank you. I appreciate your very kind words. Through the Dark is not yet available through the Library of Congress. The request has been made. I think I'm going to have to push a little harder. It took 8 years to get frijoles up there, but it will happen, and it just shows that we have the capability to move through anything, and it outlines that. And there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of delight in it. There's a lot of serious spirituality in it, and I hope everybody will read it as well as the frijoles book too. The other thing I'd like to mention, and Erica, if I could impose upon you to have them send you their emails so that you could just send me one list of emails. I have another book that I did called Good Food, Good Health. It's in English and Spanish. You could request either or both versions. And I did that as a labor of love when I was in New Mexico. And it's to it's to help people prevent heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. And it's got some wonderful recipes in there written by a indigenous Beard Award-winning chef, myself. And it's a wonderful and very informative book. So if you could send their email addresses, I can send you electronic versions of those. Of course, you could listen to audioly on your computers or on your phone.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I see another hand from Myra.
Hi, Erica. Hi, Yolanda. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. I just want to let you know, Yolanda, thank you so much for being here with us. I've enjoyed listening to you speak, and congratulations on these incredible books and all your work. You're definitely an inspiration to me. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading Los Frijoles, and hopefully in the future, your newer book once it hits the library.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I see another hand up from Margaret Rodriguez. Just in the interest of time, we do have 5
Margaret
minutes left.
Rodriguez left guest right as hand is raised.
Yes, go ahead,
Hello,
Margaret.
Yolanda, it's been such a pleasure to have spent this time with you. Your books are written so beautifully. The way you put the words together are so descriptive and touch my heart. And I'm looking so forward to reading Through the Dark. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I'm glad my words touched you, because they touched me. I went through a lot to, to share them. And I'm
Yes.
glad you're touched, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone who is interested in gaining, it's all in the frijoles, which is available through our BARD application and then also through our Braille catalog. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I will be more than happy to help you get access either through BARD or send an audiobook with her, with Yolanda's. It's all in the frijoles.
Can you send me one copy of the audio and digital? Yes.
Sure. May I ask who this is?
Fabian Castillo.
Fabian. Thank you, Fabian.
Okay.
I think that the BARD is listed under my last name, comma, Yolanda. Somebody told me that, if that's helpful to people looking it up on BARD.
Myra Garcia. I'm interested in receiving the audio book as well.
Thank you, Myra.
Yes, definitely. I would like to also, Margaret Rodriguez. It's
you,
been
Margaret.
Incredible. I'm so excited about reading the books. I can hardly wait to get my hands on them. Thank you.
If you want the good food, good health, Erica, send Erica your email address so I can forward that to you. The other book. One book, The Good Food, Good Health is not available in the stores. That was a project I did in New Mexico. So that it's just short. It's a 70-page book, but it's got a lot of really wonderful information in it too for healthy living.
Great. Thank you.
Gabriela Alvarez, if you are in this meeting, please let us know. Not sure if she's here or not. And the reason I'm asking is because, Yolanda, if individual participants from today's workshop are interested in getting in contact with you, how would they be able to get in contact with you?
Well, I think why don't they ask for the book, and then they will be. I'll send them the book electronically, and they'll be able to be in contact. Because I'll have my email there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it. That way it comes in on one list rather than I have to work, I know who it is and I can familiarize myself with those people and, be in touch.
I'm notating that.
One of the things I'd like to mention is that I just started last month for Women's History Month, a new YouTube channel. Do you see what I see? And so it's, you could go, put that on your computer and do you see what I see on YouTube, or Yolanda Nava, do you see what I see? And I did 2 interviews last month that are fabulous, really good. And I just did an interview yesterday with Gloria Molina, Supervisor Gloria Molina of Los Angeles. And that's a wonderful interview as well. And I'll be doing this, maybe 1 or 2 a month indefinitely. I'm starting out with people that were in It's All in the Frijoles, and then I would expand out from there as I get ready to do a new edition of the book, and also just to explore themes and ideas and interests that I have, and I'll be sharing those people with you too, on the YouTube.
Wonderful.
So my website is www.yolandanava.com. So it's my name, Yolanda, Nava, Nava, all one word, yolandanava.com.
Yes, someone had one quick question. We are getting ready to end.
Hi, Erica. This is Gabriela Alvarez. Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Just wanted to say yes, I'm here. Thank you, Ms. Nava, for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And Erica did mention if there is a possibility to touch base with you and in another capability, email, or what have you. I appreciate that as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just send her your email and ask for the good food, good health, and then we can be in touch that way.
Thank
And
you so much.
that's free. There's no cost for that. I'll just send you the copy of that book, and you could read it on your devices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes Yolanda Nava's workshop, our Emmy Award-winning Braille student, author, speaker, news anchor, reporter, and above all, storyteller. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Yolanda. Your stories are a gift to us all. And
Well,
everyone have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, Erica.
Bye.
Thanks for having
Thank you,
me to work.
Yolanda.
Bye, Erica. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Two
Hasta
Bye,
participants
Erica.
left the
Thank
call.
you.
Bye.
Two participants left the call. Two participants left the call. Guest left the call. +1714-791-1642 left the call. Guest left.